Okay, so the first time I heard that Red Skull ripped Xavier's brain out of his body and used it to become a psychic god, I had to double check if that was what actually happened or just something the Reddit fans had spinning around. But no, guys, Marvel really went there, because there's evil, and then there's Red Skull with Professor X's brain evil. And Marvel really went big on the idea of taking Hitler's biggest fan, who steals the mind of Earth's most powerful psychic, and somehow made it worse. The moment Red Skull upgraded from your everyday genocidal maniac to reality-warping alien, things took a turn for the cosmic, and not in a cute Guardians of the Galaxy way. He no longer needed nukes or giant robots. He could make people hate each other. Simple. He messed with minds on a global scale, turning peaceful crowds into mobs and heroes into paranoid wrecks. In this video, I walk you through how Red Skull went full-on God mode, why he thought hijacking Charles Xavier's mind was a good idea, and how the whole thing spiraled into Axis, one of the messiest Marvel events out there. We'll get into how it happened, what it meant, Magneto trying to fix things by making everything worse, the Avengers and X-Men fighting each other, and villains suddenly turning heroic because reasons. This was Red Skull at his worst and most dangerous. It's a mess, but it's a fun one. So yeah, welcome to Red Onslaught, Marvel's version of a god complex with a Nazi mustache. Who is Red Onslaught? Back in 1942, when it started to look like Hitler's little world domination plan was going belly up, the original Red Skull, one of Marvel's oldest and nastiest villains, came back for another boring Nazi rerun. This maniac decided to step up and become something way worse, Red Onslaught. This wasn't some cut-paste job. The clone was designed to be the Skull 2.0. Fresh body, same twisted ideas, same burning hate for freedom, mutants, and against anything that looked remotely like peace. He handed the job over to none other than Arnim Zola, the Nazi scientist who was practically built to do shady science in dark basements. Zola was told to lock it up and keep it asleep until the world was ready for a second round of chaos. The logic was simple. If the Reich fell, which it very much looked like it would, the clone would lie low and then wake up when people got soft again, when they forgot what real evil looked like. So the clone went underground, literally, stored away like some time bomb waiting for its time while the decades passed by. The Cold War, disco, the internet, all of it. Nobody knew he existed, not even most of Hydra. It was a backup plan hidden so well, it almost didn't get triggered. Another iteration of Red Onslaught is what you get when Red Skull, already a war criminal and full-time Nazi scumbag, gets his hands on Charles Xavier's brain. Yes, his actual brain. If you don't know Onslaught, it was originally a fusion of Magneto's anger and Professor X's darkest thoughts, creating a psychic god-tier villain back in the 90s. Now, everything villainous about the original Skull was mixed with Charles Xavier's telepathic powers and the chaos of Onslaught, all in equal parts. And we have something that feels like it shouldn't even exist on paper, let alone in the middle of a Marvel event. He attached Professor X's brain onto his own body because he wanted telepathy. Not a hint of it, all of it. That kind of power in Skull's hands? Horrifying doesn't begin to cover it. For a while, he played it cool. He used his shiny new psychic powers to control, monger hate, and manipulate people like they were puppets. And then it got worse. During the events of Avengers and X-Men Axis, Red Skull's stolen telepathic power spiraled out of control. He unleashed psychic hate waves that crippled even the most heroic minds. Iron Man, Thor, and Scarlet Witch turned. Morals were thrown out of the room. Heroes became villains, and villains started acting like saints. Kinda like a reverse Uno card played on the whole Marvel universe. And Red Onslaught enjoyed it all. He called it World War Hate, if that makes any sense. The Avengers and X-Men didn't even stand a chance at first. They had to use magic and science to get their own moral alignments back to normal before they could even touch him. That's how messed up this guy made the world. Red Skull already hated mutants, peace, and freedom, but Red Onslaught didn't just hate. Instead, he tried to burn it all down and rebuild it in his own creepy image. And for a moment there, it looked like he actually could. Major role of Red Onslaught in Marvel Comics. At a certain point, even Magneto, known for his restraint and patience, snapped. And honestly, who could blame him? Red Skull had gone full lunatic and turned Genosha into a concentration camp. But when he stole Charles Xavier's brain and grafted it into his own, he stopped being the old Skull and evolved into Red Onslaught. This was no longer about controlling a city or bending a few minds, but only about chaos, manufactured hate, and a Reich eternal built on the bones of Earth's heroes. And all he wanted was the whole world watching while he set it on fire. And that's exactly what he did. It started with Los Angeles. Plant Man was out there causing a ruckus, but that was just the bait. The Avengers flew in to take care of him, but instead, they found themselves punching each other. Thor bashed Captain America, while Cap pounded Vision. The only reason it didn't turn into a full Avenger-on-Avenger brawl was because Iron Man shut down the whole psychic mess with a psi blocker just in time. But that's when the call came in from Steve Rogers that the hate riots had broken out everywhere. The whole planet was losing its mind, and Steve knew exactly who was behind it. Red Skull had made his move. Over in Genosha, Red Skull was already showing off his new powers. Meanwhile, Havoc was living a lie in his head. He thought he was safe, in bed with Wasp, their daughter between them. But the truth was, he was stuck in one of Red Onslaught's re-education camps, and it was pouring. Red Skull, now transformed into Red Onslaught, was gloating about burning the world down and rebuilding it in his own image. And yeah, he meant it literally. Outside, Magneto, Scarlet Witch, and Rogue were trying to bring the monster down. But Onslaught had Xavier's psychic might. He broke into Wanda's mind and twisted her allegiance. Havoc snapped out of the illusion and stormed into the battle. But instead of helping, he lashed out at Magneto. Yeah, real helpful, pal. He blamed him for Xavier's death and the birth of this monster. Havoc's rage sent Magneto flying into a nearby building, which turned out to be a lucky break. Inside, locked up, were Cyclops, Quentin Quire, and Genesis. Magneto broke their chains, but the brothers, Cyclops and Havoc, instead of teaming up, went at each other. Years of brotherly baggage exploded right there, until Genesis stepped in, only to get impaled by Ahab. So it was all chaos, as you can see. Back at Avengers Tower, Steve Rogers and the team worked out a plan to find an end to the threat. The hate riots weren't stopping, and the world was tearing itself apart, and Wasp, already feeling Havoc slipping away, finally told the others about the child she and Alex had. She left, overwhelmed, wondering what all this fighting was even for if everything they loved kept getting wiped away. Then came the flood. Avengers dropped in. Iron Man, Thor, Cap, Vision, and Hawkeye. X-Men joined. Nightcrawler, Storm, and Colossus. More heroes followed. Hulk, Kitty Pryde, Doctor Strange, Power Man, Iron Fist, Beast, and an army of capes and claws. But Red Onslaught wasn't done yet. Like the good old villain he was, Red Onslaught revealed he had been poking around in Stark's head way back, and had quietly nudged Tony into building something horrifying. Stark didn't remember it, but deep in his brain, Red Onslaught had planted the blueprint for a new kind of Sentinel, one that wasn't hunting mutants alone. These things were built with inside knowledge on nearly every hero's weakness, thanks to Stark's Civil War files. Before Tony could react, Red Onslaught dropped 2 Stark Sentinels from the sky, coated in adamantium, which meant nothing could really scratch them, and were solely designed to wipe out mutants, Avengers, and everyone in between. And now, Red Onslaught activated them. That was the moment everything went from bad to worse. Red Onslaught wasn't bluffing. He wasn't in this to win a battle, but wanted to rewrite the entire game. He had the world right where he wanted it, and he made sure everyone knew this war was just getting started. By the time the Sentinels showed up, the battle was already in favor of Red Onslaught, and it was already too late. The Stark Sentinels fought smart. They knew how to use the heroes' strengths against them. Some got shrunk with Pym particles and were sealed away in containment cells. Others were overwhelmed and captured. Tony Stark tried to dig through his scrambled memories to find some kind of flaw in them, but whatever he had known before, Skull had buried deep. One of the Sentinels cornered Iron Man. It pressed down on him, grinding his armor as he strained and stalled for time. It would have crushed him flat if Strange hadn't warped in and yanked him out. Barely. Meanwhile, Rogue had an idea. She knew there was still a piece of the old professor buried in Red Skull's mind, hiding under all that hate. So if Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch cast a spell that would wake Xavier's buried consciousness and invert Red Skull's mind, that might just work for the Avengers. And so, Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange combined their powers, trying to open a path for Rogue to dive into Onslaught's mind and pull Xavier to the surface. But Nova fumbled, and the spell never got off the ground. Before the spellcasters could try again, both Strange and Wanda were caught by the Sentinels. Tony came to in the ruins and saw that a handful of survivors were still up. Cyclops, Havoc, Colossus, Wasp, Medusa, Invisible Woman, Quentin Quire, and Nightcrawler. That was it. The big teams were gone. Everyone else had either been captured, vanished, or smashed into the dirt. This broken bunch made one final call to fight anyway. They set their differences aside, formed the Unity Squad Xavier had dreamed about, and charged Red Onslaught one more time. But one by one, they vanished. In the end, Tony stood alone. That's when Red Onslaught decided to gloat. His Sentinels had done their job. The Unity Squad was finished, and the so-called genius in the metal suit was on his knees. knees. He dug into Tony's mind again and saw everything. Told him he wasn't a hero, but only a narcissist who built toys to win fights and feed his ego. But before he could really enjoy the moment, Magneto came back. And this time, he didn't walk in with more heroes, he brought villains. Ones the Sentinels weren't prepared for. Carnage, Sabretooth, Deadpool, Mystique, enemies who weren't in Stark's Civil War files. When villains like Carnage are the ones stepping up to do the right thing, you can say things are getting pretty serious. And for the first time, Red Onslaught looked a little less certain, because heroes he could predict. But villains? They didn't fit Red Onslaught's plans, and was something he didn't account for. The monster had finally met something it couldn't predict. The villains went straight for the Sentinels and Red Onslaught, wrecking everything in their path. Deadpool, of course, was dragging Iron Man out of the wreckage while ranting non-stop about becoming an Avenger and whether anyone remembered to DVR his favorite soap. Loki and Doom didn't waste time with speeches. They had spells to cast and angles to exploit. Red Onslaught watched the chaos with contempt. His eyes, if you could call them that, focused on Captain America stepping through the smoke. Except it wasn't Steve Rogers. It was Mystique disguised as Cap, and the real play was behind her. She tricked Red Onslaught for just long enough for Enchantress to cast a love spell. For a few seconds, he staggered, lost his grip. Still, the distraction worked, and the villains tore through one of the Sentinels, and Red Onslaught's psychic spell shattered, freeing a bunch of the trapped heroes inside. Magneto, too, cut through the mess and busted Wanda and Strange out of their Sentinel cells. Doom and Scarlet Witch decided to give the inversion spell another shot. This time, it landed, and Red Onslaught's mind was broken. When the light cleared, Genosha was a ruin, but the Sentinels were dead. The heroes trapped inside were free, and Red Skull, no longer Onslaught, lay unconscious on the ground, shriveled, still, and back to his old self. The job looked done, but the villains vanished before anyone could even thank them. The X-Men, led by Cyclops, wanted to take the Skull back to the Jean Grey school and dig into his mind, just to be sure if any of Xavier's mind was still rattling around in there. But the Avengers, with the new Captain America, Sam Wilson, at the helm, pushed for a trial. They took the Skull to Stark Tower for containment. The move didn't sit well with everyone. Havoc, tired, angry, and disillusioned, turned his back on the Avengers and walked off with the X-Men. Wasp watched him leave, heartbroken but silent, then turned back to the wreckage with her team. Red Onslaught was gone, but the mess he made was deeper than ever. This was a war that pulled the worst out of everyone and showed what happened when the line between hero and tyrant got blurred by one man's hate. Looks, goals, powers, and personality of Red Onslaught. When Red Skull fused with Onslaught, what came out of that unholy merger was no longer just a Nazi with a grudge. Red Onslaught became one of the most terrifying forces Earth ever spat out, solely built from hate, fueled by Charles Xavier's mutant brain, and wrapped in psychic power. And he did not waste time testing limits. Certainly, if this thing had stuck around any longer, cities would have fallen like dominoes. Red Onslaught had full access to the astral plane, and we're not talking about meditation and parlor mind tricks. He could reach into the astral realm and drag astral projections out of other telepaths and force them into the physical world. He could also shapeshift, stretch, or shrink at will, grow monstrous in size, or disguise himself in ways that fooled even those standing right in front of him. He wasn't bound to one form, which made him slippery and hard to hit. But even worse than that was his mind. His telepathy was his main weapon. He could scan thoughts across entire continents, read minds, and make you believe things were happening when they weren't. He made people live out entire events that never actually happened, all to grind them down, sow distrust, and bait out rage. And he didn't stop at illusions. He could wipe memories, scramble personalities, and even hijack a body outright. That control went deep, too. He could shut down groups of people in seconds or erase their identities altogether. He protected himself with a psionic shield strong enough to block attacks from top-tier mutants. He had psionic blasts that could leave you unconscious or dead, and you started to understand why no one walked away from a fight with him the same. In the astral realm, he was even more dangerous. He could shape ectoplasmic objects, use others' thoughts to track them, and communicate across space by locking into people's memories. And on top of all that, Red Onslaught also wielded ergokinesis, which meant he could mess with raw energy itself. He could redirect or twist energy attacks, reshaping them into something worse. And if that wasn't enough, he could fire beams straight from his eyes that could tear through walls, bodies, or anything dumb enough to stand in his way. But maybe his cruelest flex wasn't even a superpower, but his use of manipulation. Under his influence, Stark built mutant-hunting Sentinels, which were later unleashed to mop the floor with the heroes, saving the day. They had every superhero's weaknesses loaded into their processors, so if you were a hero on that battlefield, they knew exactly how to break you. And thanks to Skull's whispering in Tony's brain, each Sentinel came with a PIM particle system too that let them shrink their targets and lock them like collectibles. Because Red Onslaught didn't fight fair, and he didn't care. He broke people from the inside out while wearing Xavier's face and spitting Skull's beliefs. Marvelous verdict. Red Skull, already bad news, didn't stop at being Marvel's most stubborn fascist. Instead, with Red Onslaught, he became a god, totally unhinged, all because he wanted to cleanse the world. What gets me is how quickly it escalated. And okay, I'll admit it, I kinda love how messy it got. Dude made the Avengers punch each other in the face and peeled back all the quiet, ugly stuff buried under society's skin. In the end, Red Onslaught got taken down, but not before proving that the scariest villains don't always need claws or lasers. Sometimes, all it takes is the wrong mind in the wrong skull. And if Marvel ever decides to bring him back with another psychic upgrade, I'm running the other way. Let Magneto handle it again, because I've seen how that goes.